What you are about to hear is a chilling testimony sent exclusively by a member of our private group. While on her hospital bed, a nun died clinically, and before returning to life, Jesus showed her 5 shocking events set to shake humanity starting this very month. I will read her letter directly in the first person so you can experience moment by moment what her spiritual eyes witnessed on the other side. Listen to the very last word, because these revelations could forever change the way you look at our future. When I came back, the first thing I did was cry. Not because I was in pain, not because I was scared. I cried because I had to leave. I had to come back to this body, this room, this world that suddenly felt like a paper cutout compared to what I had just seen. The nurses thought something was wrong with me. They kept asking me where it hurt, and I kept trying to say, nowhere. Nothing hurts. That's not why I'm crying. I just had to leave the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, and I don't have the right words for it. I have been a nun for 31 years. I have prayed more hours than I can count. I thought I knew what God felt like. I did not. I had no idea. My name is Sister Frances Carroll. I am 55 years old, and I live in a small convent outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. I entered religious life at 24. Before that, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, just outside of Pittsburgh. Blue-collar family. My father worked at a steel plant. My mother taught 2nd grade. I was the youngest of 4. I was never the showy one. I was the quiet one who sat by the window and watched things. I entered the convent because I felt called there the way some people feel called to medicine or teaching. It wasn't dramatic. It was just obvious to me. The way the sky is obviously blue. I have never once regretted it. For the past 12 years, I have been working in hospital ministry. I sit with the dying. I hold hands. I pray with families. I have watched hundreds of people leave this world. So when my own body started failing in the spring of 2026, I thought I understood what was coming. I thought I was prepared. I was not even close to prepared. In early July of 2026, I was admitted to Christ Hospital in Cincinnati with what my doctors described as acute cardiac arrest brought on by a blood clot that had been sitting there quietly for who knows how long. I was 55 years old. I had been healthy my entire life. I walked every morning. I didn't smoke. And then one afternoon in my room, I felt this pressure behind my sternum, like someone was pressing their whole palm flat against the inside of my chest, and everything went white. Not black, white. I want to make sure I say that correctly because people always say everything went black. Mine went white. It was like walking into fog, except the fog had warmth in it. And then the fog started pulling back in pieces, the way curtains open. And I was standing somewhere. I could feel the ground under me. It felt solid, dense, like standing on packed earth after a long rain. And the light was everywhere, not blinding. More like the light on a late afternoon in October, when the sun is low and it turns everything golden. That's the closest comparison I have. That October light. But it was coming from everything, not just from one direction. The ground had it. The air had it. I had it. I looked at my hands, but they were there. They were my hands. And I heard a voice, not in my ears, deeper than that, somewhere in the center of my chest where the pressure had been. It said my name. Sister Frances. That's all. Just my name. And I turned, and he was there. I am not going to be dramatic about this. I am just going to tell you what I saw. He was tall. He was standing maybe 15 feet from me. His robe was not white like the paintings. It was the color of undyed linen, off-white, heavy-looking, and his face was not gentle the way people draw him. He was serious. He was looking at me the way a doctor looks at you right before he tells you something that changes everything. Completely present, like nothing else in the universe existed except this conversation we are about to have. And I started to weep. I just started weeping, not from sadness, from recognition. That's the only word, recognition. Like I had known him my whole life and had somehow forgotten what his face looked like. And now I was remembering. The weeping wasn't embarrassing, it wasn't messy, it was just true. He let me cry for a moment, and then he spoke, and his voice felt like standing next to a waterfall. That same fullness, that same sensation of sound filling every part of the air around you. He said, I have things to show you. He said, you will go back. He said, what you are about to see, you will carry with you, and you will tell people who listen not to be afraid. And then the ground beneath me opened up, and I was looking down at the earth. And I knew I was looking at August of 2026. He told me that directly. He said, this is August, and what I am showing you begins in the next few weeks. And the first thing I saw was the sky. Not the whole sky, specific skies. I saw the sky over the Great Plains, over Nebraska, over Kansas, and it was wrong. It was the wrong color. Not orange like a sunset, more like a deep copper, like the inside of an old penny. And I could see from where I was that the sun had thrown something out. Some enormous burst of energy, something that our instruments on the ground had never recorded at that magnitude before. I saw the number. It was 8.9 on whatever scale they use for those solar events. I am not a scientist, I just saw that number clearly. And what it did to the earth below was extraordinary. I watched it move across the United States like a wave moves across water, and everything electronic in its path went quiet. Not broken, just quiet. And the first city I saw clearly was Kansas City. I could see the streets. I could see the traffic lights going dark, just blinking out mid-cycle. I could see people stepping out of their cars on the highway because the cars just stopped. Everything with a chip or a circuit or a signal. Gone. Silent. And that silence spread east. I saw Chicago. I saw Indianapolis. I saw the lights of Cincinnati going dark all at once, grid by grid. Like someone pulling a plug from the wall of a room that holds 50 million people. Jesus was standing beside me as I watched this. And I said to him, how long? How long does this last? And he said, 3 days. He said 3 days and 3 nights. And in that time, not one message will travel through the air from one telephone to another. Not one. And I felt the enormity of that. I said, people will be terrified. And he said, yes. And then he said, but watch what else happens. And I watched. And what happened inside those 3 days was not the chaos I expected. I saw families eating together at kitchen tables. I saw neighbors knocking on each other's doors. I saw an elderly woman in Chicago apartment who had not spoken to her daughter in 4 years, standing in a doorway, crying, and her daughter was there. They had walked to find each other because they had no other way to reach each other, and they were holding on. The second thing he showed me was happening at the same time, but further south. I saw a river, a wide brown river, and then I understood it was the Mississippi River. Around the middle of August 2026, the water level was dropping. It was dropping fast, faster than any drought on record. And I saw the exposed riverbed. I saw things coming out of that riverbed that had not been seen in 150 years. Old structures, old foundations, wooden pilings from before the Civil War. And I watched scientists and historians rushing to the site. And I saw them pulling things out of that mud. Documents sealed in lead canisters. Documents that had been placed there intentionally and had been sitting in that silt since before the First World War. And those documents had names on them. They had dates. They had amounts of money, and what those papers described was something that had been happening in this country for a very long time. And that powerful people in more than one city had worked very hard to make sure no one ever found. He showed me the reaction. The news coming out of New Orleans and Memphis and St. Louis. The faces of anchors on television programs looking at papers and then looking at the camera and not knowing what expression to make. And I felt the anger rising in the people watching. It was like watching a pressure gauge climb. And I said, there is going to be tremendous anger. And he said, yes. And he said, the anger is not the sin. The anger is appropriate. He said, what you do with the anger will either heal this nation or break it further. He said, tell them to let the institutions fall that need to fall. But do not let your own heart become what you are fighting against. Before we continue, if this story is touching your heart, please take a moment to subscribe and leave a like. Drop a comment below with the city or country you are listening from. Reading your messages brings us all closer and keeps us united on this journey. And now, let's continue. The third thing he showed me was the most precise. He showed me a date, August 23rd. And I watched the sky again. But this time over the Eastern Seaboard of the United States, over Washington, D.C., and over the coast of Virginia and Maryland. And I saw what looked like lights in the upper atmosphere. Not stars, moving lights. Dozens of them, moving in patterns that were not random. Moving in formations. And they were visible, not just on radar, visible. People on the ground in those cities were standing on their lawns with their faces turned up. I saw people in Baltimore, people in Philadelphia, standing outside in the late evening, looking at these lights, moving in absolute silence across the sky. And I said, what is this? And he said, this is not the first time this has happened. He said, the difference is this time there will be no explanation that satisfies, and the world will have to begin asking a question it has been afraid to ask. And I asked, are they in danger? And he said, they are not your enemy. Fear is the danger, not the lights. He said, when you see this, look up and do not run. The ones who are afraid will make choices that hurt other people. The ones who stay calm will understand that the creation is larger than the part of it you have been shown. He was very deliberate when he said that. Very slow and clear, like he wanted me to get every single word. The fourth event he showed me was not a spectacle. It was quiet, and it affected me the most. I saw a city, and at first, I thought it was Los Angeles. But I understood later it was Phoenix, Arizona. Late August 2026, and it was hot. I could feel the heat even from where I was standing, 128 degrees Fahrenheit. I saw the number on a bank sign, 128. And I watched the water coming out of the taps in apartment buildings slow to a trickle and then stop. I watched children being carried to cooling centers. I watched city buses converted into moving shade stations driving through neighborhoods. And I saw a priest, a young priest, standing at an intersection giving out water bottles from a folding table. He had been there for 19 hours straight. I could see from the set of his shoulders how exhausted he was, and people were coming to him, not just for water, just to be near to someone who was calm, and he was calm. He was completely calm. And Jesus said to me, watching that young priest, he said this is what I meant. Not the spectacle, this. I started to understand something standing there. I started to understand that the events he was showing me were not punishments. Not one of them felt like punishment. They felt more like pressure, like the kind of pressure that forces something to the surface, like heat that brings out what is hidden in metal. I said this to him, "You are not angry at us." And he said, "No, I am never without compassion for you, not for 1 second. But some things cannot come to the surface unless they are pushed." He said, "A field does not yield its harvest unless the ground is broken up first." And he looked at me very directly and he said, "This is the breaking open. Do not explain it as wrath. Explain it as preparation." The fifth thing he showed me was the one I've had the hardest time putting into words. It was not a disaster. It was not a crisis. It was something happening inside of people. He showed me churches filling up, not the big ones, not the televised ones, the small ones, the neighborhood ones. I saw a small Baptist church on a street corner in Detroit, Michigan. I saw people standing outside in a line that went around the block. I saw a Catholic parish in Houston, Texas, opening its doors at 4 a.m. because people were coming at all hours and they couldn't turn them away. I saw a mosque in Dearborn, Michigan, with cars parked on the grass because the lot was full at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night. And I said, "Why? What is bringing them?" And he said, "The silence did it." When I took away the noise for 3 days, something woke up in the human heart that had been sleeping for a very long time. He said the hunger was always there. They just couldn't hear it over everything else. And then I felt it. What those people in those buildings were feeling. He let me feel it just for a moment. And it was the same thing I had felt the second I arrived wherever I was with him. That recognition, that sense of something returning, something that had been yours a long time ago, and that you had gradually, slowly put down along the way and forgotten. And I stood there and I wept again. And he said, "This is why I am showing you. You know how to speak to the frightened ones. You have sat with the dying for 12 years. You know that when a person stops being afraid of what is ending, they can finally pay attention to what is beginning." He said, "That is what August 2026 is." He looked at me steadily. He said, "A beginning." And then he said, "It is time." And I knew what he meant and I grabbed onto his arm. I grabbed the sleeve of that undyed linen and I said, "Please." I said, "I've been walking toward you my whole life. 31 years in convent and I was still just walking toward you." I said, "I'm finally here. Please." He put his hand over mine. His hand was warm. His hand was the warmest thing I have ever touched in my entire life. And I have spent 55 years on this earth. He said, "Sister Francis," he said it so gently. He said, "The ones in those hospitals you sit with, who will sit with them if you don't go back?" And I didn't have an answer. I just held on to him another moment. And then I let go. I opened my eyes and there were 3 nurses and a doctor in the room with me. And someone was saying, "Her pressure is coming up." And someone else was saying, "She's back." And a woman in blue scrubs was squeezing my hand so hard it hurt. And that hurt was real. And I was back. I was back in a body, in a bed in a room on the 4th floor of Christ Hospital in Cincinnati, Ohio, with tubes in both arms and a monitor beeping on my left and a crucifix on the wall in front of me. that suddenly looked more real to me than it ever had. Because I knew now. I knew what was behind it. Not a symbol, not a concept, not a theological preposition. A person. A real, solid, present person who had held my hand 20 minutes ago. Or 12 minutes. The doctors told me later I had been gone for 11 and a half minutes. I was in the hospital for 8 more days. My sisters came, my family came, my niece drove from Pittsburgh and sat with me for 3 days. And every night, I would wait until the room was quiet and I would write down everything I could remember. Every city, every number, every word he said. I have 23 pages of handwritten notes in a composition notebook on my desk right now. Not because I am afraid of forgetting. I'm not going to forget any of it. Not ever. But because he told me to tell people. And I take that seriously. I have taken every instruction he has given me seriously for 31 years and I am not about to stop now. The events I saw are coming in August of 2026. The solar silence, the rising of the river, the lights over the coast, the heat in Phoenix, and the quiet filling of small churches in cities that nobody broadcasts from. And he said, when those things come, do not be afraid. He said it clearly. He said, do not be afraid, because I am not absent from any of it. The story we have just heard reminds us that our time on earth is a precious gift, and that love is the only force capable of overcoming even the boundary of death. This account invites us to pause and reflect on our own lives before it is too late. Are we truly living with awareness, or are we letting ourselves be consumed by fears and grudges? Every day is an unrepeatable opportunity to forgive, heal our souls, and make room for what truly matters. If this testimony touched your heart and you are searching for answers, or if you are going through a difficult time and want a safe, judgment-free space to share your story and be heard, you are not alone. We have created a community to welcome anyone seeking discussion and comfort regarding experiences beyond this life. You will find the free link to join us in this description and in the first pinned comment. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos, and leave a comment with the city or country you are listening from today. It will be wonderful to read your messages and discover just how small and connected this world really is.